Paris, or better, Paris, la Cité de la Lumière. This is a two-player game only, in which players will be building Paris, no less, or at least part of the city. What's also important is, like, what's the point of building something beautiful if no one can see it? So it's not just that you're going to build a section of Paris, you're also going to make sure that the light is going to shine on it so people can see the beautiful stuff that you're putting there. It is a two-player only, so there's that limitation, but it can work as a play with your spouse. It is a simple game that you can play with children. I played it with my daughters that are currently 7 and 9, and they could both play it, and they both enjoyed it. So in these days in which we should all stay with our families and not have big game night, this could be a good game. The game is divided into two distinct phases. It's one of those games like For Sale or Biblios. The first half and the second half are completely different. In the first half, we're going to build the floor of the area we're building, and we're going to collect the building tiles. In the second half, we are going to build those buildings, and also we're going to use special actions depicted on these cards, which have to be some of the most amazing game components that I've ever seen, because look at the detail. All that you need really for the card to work as a game component is an icon that tells you what the card does. But look at the care that has been put in making these really look like postcards. The feel is exactly that of a postcard. Each has its own art. You could actually, if you don't mind running your game, you could actually ship these as postcards. That's how amazing these are. Really incredible. Frankly, just incredible. Now, the first half of the game, the one where we build the floor and we collect buildings. Each player has a stack of tiles, such as this one, with the squares that are their own color. One player uses orange, one player uses blue. Then there are squares that are a mixed color. Think of them as neutral. In the later phase of the game, either player can use them. And then you have street lights. Again, very important. When it is your turn, you look at the top tile of your stack and you can do one of two things. Either you place it on the board in this grid of 4x4. Oh, by the way, it's not that I was lazy, I didn't take out the board from the box. The board is stuck in the box. It's part of the box. I'm not sure why, but it doesn't move around too much this way. So for my turn in phase 1, I can place one, and then I simply look at the next one. So I start thinking about what I want to do, and the opponent does the same, and maybe the opponent decides to place this one like so. And then it's my turn again, and I decide to place this one here or here. That's as simple as that. Or instead of placing a tile, I can take a building from this pool of buildings, and suppose I want to take this one. My opponent places a tile, and I decide to collect this one. Now my opponent collects this one, and so on and so forth. This phase ends when all of these tiles have been assigned to the board. And at that point, you should also have some buildings. It's a good idea to have at least 3 or 4 buildings. I'm doing this randomly, probably not very wise in terms of strategy and tactics, but it's to give you a sense of what the board may look like at the beginning of the second phase. Again, that you will have the floor built, and you should have several buildings, or else you're in trouble. When the floor is built, the second phase starts, in which these cards also will come into play. At the beginning of the game, you will select or randomly draw 8 of them, and you will simply place them in an area where they will be visible to everybody, to both players. Something like this. So, during your turn, you can do, again, 1 or 2 things, but now the range of things that you can do is different. You can build a building from your personal supply. To build a building, it needs to cover areas of your color and or neutral areas. So for orange, this would be a legal placement. You cannot cover streetlights. Once you put down a building from your personal supply, you also put a little chimney there on top just to indicate control. And then suppose that the blue player places that one there. And then suppose that, again, I am the orange player. What do I want to do? I want to put this one here, and so on and so forth. Remember those cards that I showed you, though? Instead of putting down a building, you can choose to activate a card. When you activate a card, you flip it face down, and you put your marker on top. You'll be able to activate 4 cards, or those 8, because you have 4 markers. And then, well, you do what it says. They'll give you different advantages. This one, for example, allows you to treat a square of the opponent's color as if it was neutral, that is, as if it was yours, and that can really help in placing down, well, things. And looking for an example, I can't really find one right now, but that's totally okay, because you know what I mean. This one will simply give you, if you activate this card, will give you an extra little building that you can just build. If you take this card, for example, you can build on a streetlight, which you usually wouldn't be able to do. And that can be also very powerful, because maybe you can deny lights to the opponent. Lights will be important for scoring. So different types, very different types of advantages. The painter, if you take this card, you get to place the painter token on the board. And then the painter will score points, suppose that orange player, put it here. The painter will score points at the end of the game for each street light in their area. Areas being marked by things. By buildings and by the edge of the board. Suppose the blue player used that token that allows the blue player to turn a tile of the opponent, a square of the opponent, into a neutral one. So blue was legally able to do so. Then at the end of the game, the area that the painter can use is, as of now, is huge. It covers most of the board, and so just to give you a sense again. Booyah. Like so. The painter would be able to score the street lamps in that area. Now, we continue like this until all buildings that can possibly be placed have been placed, and until all cards have been selected. You can also select an action without taking its action. You still just remove it, mark it with your own token. Still good, because maybe you want to deny that action to the opponent. At that point, we score points. Each building, as you see, is divided into squares. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you have a smaller one, like 4. Each building is worth to the owning player the number of squares of the building multiplied by the number of adjacent streetlights. I told you, if you can't see a building, what's the point? That means, for example, that this building is worth 3, because 3 times 1 is 1. That also means a building which is completely in the dark is worth 0 points. So you calculate the individual value of each building. Then you look at your largest group, and buildings count as part of the same group when they're adjacent to one another by an edge, not by a corner. So this would be my largest group. Each square in the largest group counts as 1 point. Cards that I may have selected, say like the painter, may give me points, which I also add. Each tile that I still have at the end of the game that I wasn't able to place gives me a penalty. At that point, when all is said and done and all scores have been totaled, the player with the highest score is the winner of the game. This is a fun, enjoyable game. The structure may be a little confusing at first, because it's almost like you're playing 2 mini games back to back. Of course, in the first phase you're preparing the second, but still you're performing fairly different actions, completely different actions in the 2 phases. I like the simplicity. In each phase, there are only 2 actions to choose from, but they're significant, but you can perform them in different ways. It's not 1 or 0. When you decide to place a tile, then where do you want to put it, in which orientation? You're trying possibly to create nice blobs of your own color with light, next to them. You're trying to spread out the squares of the color of the opponent that you also have on your tiles. The opponent is trying to do the same. You're trying to be a little bit of freeloader. You put a nice blob of things of your color next to a street lamp that the opponent put there. So there are interesting decisions there. And of course, you want to get the right buildings, and you're committed because, well, then they'll give you a penalty. There's a card that you can take in the second phase that annuls the penalty, but then you're spending a card just to do that. So that's not ideal, especially because those actions in the second part, they can be pretty powerful. So these situations are interesting per se because you're trying to decide what you want to do and again, what could be the best chain of events. But they're all a lot more interesting when you, well, add the opponent. That is, when you're performing all these actions in a context of great scarcity. There are only 8 actions in the second phase of the game. And maybe due to the situation, 1 or 2 are not that powerful. There aren't many tiles, so building tiles to take in the first phase of the game, and they look very different from one another. So I'm spending several turns placing my tiles in a way that I can take the big T, or I can take the cross, or the L. And once I have that perfectly done, I look at the supply, and you just took that piece. Thank you. Well, then next time I'm gonna I'm gonna maybe put some tiles there. Haven't built the area exactly that I want to do, but I'm gonna take the tiles so you don't take it, and then look at the board, oh, and you place one of your tiles where I wanted to place the building that I just got. So actually, for a game that is so simple, there's quite a little of reading what the opponent may be trying to do. Just get there one turn before, because there's such scarcity when it comes to the building tiles and to the actions. Again, maybe I have a tile that doesn't really match anywhere on the board, unless I get that action that turns a tile of your color into a neutral one, that turns a street light into something I can build on. So many different things, but there's a sense of tension because anything that you really need that would really pay off takes a couple of turns to create a situation where it is interesting, which means that the opponent has the time to either take the building before you want it, or put the terrain tile, the floor tile where you need it, or to take that action before you can take it, or they take the action, they place it in a position that is super annoying, etc., etc., etc. Simple ideas, but they make the game really effective. I play with my daughters, they really enjoy it. I play with my wife, and actually she doesn't like it all that much. She did not like the 2-act drama. She felt that the two things were too disconnected. She struggled figuring out in the first part how to set up a profitable situation for the second part. And actually she did pretty well. She lost, but she scored decently, but she lost. But the point is that she said that despite the fact that she lost, it wasn't the loss, it wasn't the defeat that she didn't like, but just the overall experience. So I guess that, and I could kind of guess that when you have a game that again is almost like 2 mini games together, you're gonna have that. Is not a crowd pleaser kind of game, because a more cohesive, a more organic, a more straightforward arc or progression in a game is simply something that usually pleases more people. But if you're willing to put in that little teeny tiny bit of homework and learning rules for the 2 phases of the game, and then to put in that extra homework to figure out a strategy that pays off, and to me actually that is part of the fun, precisely that challenge, then this is a really fun, enjoyable game. Again, not for everybody, but personally I like it. I think it gave me interesting puzzle to solve, interesting problems, but more than anything, really a challenge when it comes to opportunity. Just doing everything. There's a moment of tension that the opponent could just do the same thing first, and you're trying also to figure it out how you can take just that tile, you can put just that floor, just to get in the way of the opponent. So simple game with a lot of indirect interaction, with a lot of, there's a confrontational element which may not be apparent at first, But since everything that I do, I take from you in a situation of extreme scarcity, then of course there is confrontation right there. That may make it not, again, a crowd pleaser, but for me and for my daughters, this was fun to play.